Hello, horror fans, and welcome back to Jay vs. Horror. I'm your host, Jay Wall, and guys, today we are going to be taking on the top 10 horror films of 1982. Now, just to preface, these are just my picks. These are my personal favorites, so don't get too upset. Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys, and leave me some stuff in the comments. Let me know where you think I went wrong, what films I may have missed, or which films you thought I had a little too high or a little too low on the list. Now, to be honest, guys, I put this one off a little bit because I went through 80 and 81 pretty quick, knowing which films I loved from those years. Now, with 82, it was a little different. I had to watch some films. I had to actually go through and watch 4 or 5 films that I hadn't seen just to make sure. I didn't want to leave something out if I actually believed that it belonged in. Most of them I had seen, but yeah, pretty unusual for me to have to watch 4 or 5. I think it was 5 films I had to watch for this. So let's get started, guys. At number 10, I have The New York Ripper. It's an Italian giallo film directed by Lucio Fulci. While most of Fulci's films have been released uncut in the United Kingdom, The New York Ripper remains censored there to this day. The film stars Jack Hedley as Lieutenant Fred Williams, Paolo Malco as Dr. Paul Davis, Almonta Susca as Faye Majors, and Howard Ross as Mickey Scalinda. Guys, The New York Ripper is simply a sleazy, gory giallo film that's a ton of fun to watch. It has some great kills in it. We have 3 main characters that have different storylines that kind of interweave to create a mystery. And all in all, it's one of my favorite Fulci films. I'd say it's in my top 10 all time when it comes to Fulci. And it does have that Fulci stamp of great gore to it. So let's take a look at my number 10 pick, The New York Ripper.
Are you all there? That's me, Lieutenant Williams.
Speaking. What do you want?
To dedicate a murder to you.
Somebody called for you.
Yeah, who?
A guy with a strange voice. Said he'd call you back. He sounded just like a duck.
Just like a duck.
The guy who attacked her is our friend who calls and talks like a duck. Well, he's made his first big mistake.
Yeah. Anyway, we've got all 5 boroughs alerted, and we'll also inform all the radio stations. Shouldn't be too hard to find a guy missing 2 fingers in his right hand.
Poor dumb cop. You don't think I'd be so hours to let you pinpoint me with your stupid tracing machines, do you?
Hey! Hey!
You give me all the data and we'll wait till the next victim.
So you think he'll do it again?
Oh, yes.
At number 9, The Living Dead Girl. It's a French horror drama film directed by Jean Rollin and starring Marina Pirot, Francois Blanchard, and Mike Marshall. The story involves a young woman who has returned from the dead and needs human blood in order to survive. Guys, this is a very underrated film. I'm sure you've heard it referenced in the Rob Zombie song Living Dead Girl. It's a pretty interesting zombie film from France. They've had a few. Another underrated one they had in 2009 was called Mutants. Nobody ever talks about that. And it's a very strong zombie film. But this one is just different than all the other zombie films you've ever seen. It's really just about one girl who comes back from the dead, and in this one, she starts to slowly regain her human senses and realize that she's a zombie. So it has a different take on the whole genre. Guys, let's take a look at the trailer for the vastly underappreciated 1982 gem, The Living Dead Girl. At number 8, Friday the 13th Part 3. It's an American slasher film directed by Steve Miner, produced by Frank Mancuso Jr., and starring Dana Kimmel, Paul Kratka, and Richard Brooker as the infamous Jason Voorhees. So just to be honest, guys, this is not my favorite film in the franchise. For me, it's somewhere in the middle of the pack, but you have to give it props. You have to give it the respect it deserves in the franchise, because this is where Jason finds the iconic hockey mask that everyone knows around the world to this very day. It's also the first film in the franchise where we know for a fact that Jason Voorhees is the killer at the beginning of the film, right? Now, later on, they try to switch that up again in Part 5, but as far as Part 3 and Part 4 went, we were pretty sure we knew that Jason was the killer from the beginning. In Part 1, it's kind of a whodunit. Part 2, you think you know it's Jason, but it could be somebody else trying to set us up like they were in the first one. So more than anything, this film is iconic in my mind because it sets up the classic formula for the next 5 to 6 to 7 sequels that we would see in this franchise. There's nothing about the film I absolutely hate, but if I had to choose something I don't like, I wish we had an alternative scene on the DVD where those bikers catch up to Shelley and beat him mercilessly. That would have been a great scene, right? All right, guys, let's take a look at the trailer for Friday the 13th, Part 3.
Weekends are a good time to escape to the woods. Unless the weekend begins with Friday the 13th. Because 13 is an unlucky number. But out here, so are 1 through 12. Because these are Jason's woods. And nobody leaves them alive. Friday the 13th, Part 3 in 3D. Jason, you can't fight him. You can't stop him. And now, you can't even keep him on the screen. Friday the 13th, Part 3 in 3D. Now, when it comes to killing in Jason's woods, Jason will come to you. Friday the 13th, Part 3 in 3D. A new dimension in terror. It will scare you. Count on it.
At number 7. Now, guys, I might take some heat for this one, but I chose Amityville 2 The Possession. It's my favorite of the early Amityville films, and I really do believe it is a good film. I know a lot of people don't like this movie. It makes them a little uncomfortable with the fact that it is kind of exploiting the actual crime that happened at the house and also adding on all these weird supernatural elements and incestuous elements and other things that probably weren't true about that family. So yeah, a lot of people think the film is distasteful, or they hate it for the fact that it's taking elements from stuff like The Exorcist and other movies and cramming them into this true story and then putting it out as a sequel. So there's quite a few reasons why people don't like Amityville 2 The Possession, but I do like it. I think when I was a kid and I saw it, I didn't think about it that much, so that made it a little bit easier for me to enjoy the film. It is, of course, a supernatural horror film directed by Damiano Damiani. The screenplay was by Tommy Lee Wallace, and it's based on the novel Murder in Amityville. However, this novel was written by a parapsychologist named Hans Holder, and it's supposed to be a loose prequel to the Amityville Horror from 1979, and it's set, of course, at 112 Ocean Avenue. But you have to wonder about this guy. How much real knowledge does he have of the case? How much is it just what he's been told or able to get a hold of? There's still that whole factor of it's one of those situations where if you weren't there, you don't know what exactly went down, and you can't say otherwise without smudging the memory of those people a little bit. You can't say things about a brother and a sister and stuff like that and make up these weird off-the-wall theories about what was happening in that house when you never stepped foot in there while any of it was happening. And that's all I have to say about that particular point. I like the movie. I think it's good. It has Burt Young in it, of course, from Rocky, and it is loosely based on the tragedy that occurred there with the DeFeo family, although it is taken to the extreme. It's like, the old joke from Spinal Tap turned up to 11, right? It's there's supernatural elements added that weren't even in the first film, and it's really uncomfortable at times. I'll say that the movie will make you uncomfortable at times. If I have any complaints with it, I'm not sure about the ending. The big Exorcist ending for this movie seemed weird to me because they had to create this illogical situation where he was able to get out of jail after murdering his entire family to go back to this house, and that's just kind of killed it for me. Even when I was a kid, I kind of called BS on that part of the film. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it a whole lot, guys. And I think if you watch the first 4 or 5 Amityville movies, even the ones they started to do on TV later on, it really holds up as one of the better ones. So let's take a look at the trailer for Amityville 2, The Possession.
The night of February 5th, 1976, George and Kathleen Lutz and their 3 children fled their home in Amityville, New York, and never returned. For them, the horror was over. Their living nightmare shocked audiences around the world in the Amityville Horror. But before them, another family lived in this house and were caught by the original evil. The Lutzes escaped with their lives, but the previous owners weren't so lucky.
Look at it! Oh, it's ours!
Heavenly Father, bless our new home and watch over us as we become a part of
For
this.
the Montelli family, it was their dream house until it turned into a nightmare.
Who's there?
I'm scared.
What was in this house? What evil could drive their son to madness and destroy everything and everyone he loved? now. Amityville 2, The Possession. Amityville 2, The Possession.
At number 6, Pieces. It's a slasher film, and some people call it as yellow film. There's an argument there that I've seen between certain fans. I don't really see that much difference between the two genres in this particular film. I see influences from both. So, yeah, it's listed as a slasher film. It's directed by Juan Piquer Simone and stars Christopher George, Linda Day George, Frank Brana, Edmund Purdom, and of course, I would have deep regret if I did not mention Bruce Lee. That's right. Back then, in the early 80s, they had a lot of these Bruce Lee impersonators running around, and they just spelled their last name differently. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, this particular Bruce was Bruce Lee, L-I. And he looked a lot like Bruce Lee, and he had some pretty good martial arts skills, so he made a living going around being in films, cameoing on TV and stuff like that as Bruce Lee. That's supposed to be a pun. I don't know. This film is crazy. It's over the top. It's got everything but the kitchen sink in it. There's gore. There's chainsaws. There's a mystery. All in all, guys, it's just a fun, goofy slasher that doesn't get mentioned enough. Let's take a look at the trailer for Pieces. At number 5, Tenebrae. It's an Italian giallo film written and directed by the great Dario Argento. The film stars Anthony Franciosa as American author Peter Neal, who, while in Rome promoting his latest murder mystery novel, becomes embroiled in the search for a serial killer who may have been inspired to kill by his latest novel. John Saxon and Daria Nicolodi co-star as Neal's agent and assistant. So, guys, what we have here is a fun murder mystery where there's a psycho on the loose, and he is ripping pages out of Peter Neal's book and shoving them down the throat of his victims. It's actually quite brutal when you see it. But, yeah, I don't think Tenebrae is right there on the level with films like Deep Red, but it's not far below that. I would say this is a solid 8 out of 10 film, and I like it a lot, even though I know some people do compare it to Deep Red and other films that say it's just so similar that it doesn't have a lot of originality to it. I don't agree with that. I think the film is very interesting. They tried to go for something different. These guys were always trying to outdo each other with their endings, their big twist endings. And I think Tenebrae tried to do that. Whether you think it succeeded or failed is ultimately up to you, though. Let's take a look at the trailer for Dario Argento's Tenebrae.
Filthy, slimy pervert.
I've read all your books, Mr. Neal. The book deals with a murder committed with an old-fashioned open razor, right? This girl, too, was killed with a razor, and your book's pages stuffed into her mouth.
Can I ask you something? If someone is killed with a Smith & Wesson revolver, do you go and interview the president of Smith & Wesson?
Peter, you can't let me down now. We're within 2 days of making a deal. Please, stay just until Friday.
My life is in danger. There's no deal in the world worth risking my life for.
Not anxiety or fear, but freedom. You wrote those words, page 46. Freedom to strike again, Peter.
Listen, don't hang up. We have to talk.
You told me how, Peter Neal. You and me together. We've just begun.
Jesus.
Overtime. Spy. That little spy.
At number 4, guys, this is totally a personal pick. This is totally self-indulgent. I love this film. I don't think it gets enough credit. I'm talking about Visiting Hours. That's right. It's a Canadian slasher film directed by Jean-Claude Lord, and it stars Lee Grant, Michael Ironside, Linda Pearl, and William Shatner. So great cast, right? Yeah, this one is very interesting. It's not like your other slasher films, okay? What we have here is a woman who's a feminist and a activist, and she has a television show, and she's talking about a woman who recently killed her husband after being abused for many years, and she's defending that, right, on her talk show. Now we see that a psycho is watching the talk show, and the psycho is played flawlessly by Michael Ironside. I don't even think he says a word in this film for like 45 minutes or something. His physical performance in the film is amazing. He is totally insane. Somebody you would not want to deal with, right? And he hates women, and he just happens to be watching this show. He's getting all fired up, and so he goes after her, and he attacks her, hurts her really bad. I won't give all the details away, but he puts her in the hospital, right? And here's where the film gets even more interesting, because once she's in the hospital, he starts losing it even more on the outside, trying to figure out how he can get into the hospital to kill her, to hurt people around her. He starts following people that go and come from the hospital. And yeah, the guy just hates women, and he is insane in this movie. It's a great film, very underrated. Look, I don't think it hit very well when it came out because people took it the wrong way. There's a lot of violence against women in the movie, but the film is making a statement against violence towards women, and it's having the courage to say that. And there's even characters in here like William Shatner's character, who also has to take some of the blame because he's a male who enables this type of behavior from other males. He doesn't approve of it. He doesn't do it himself, but he doesn't actively try to stop behavior like this from other males. Women hating and bashing and stuff like that. He's part of the system. Even though he's her boyfriend and he cares about her, he's still part of the system, and he works very hard to keep that image going. And he gets angry with her for some of her views that she does on her talk show. But anyway, it's a great film. It's got more to say than just your regular slasher. It's not just a bunch of kids in a cabin in the woods. It's a very socially impactful film, even to this day. Let's take a look at the trailer for Visiting Hours.
In this hospital, your next visit may be your last.
All visitors, please leave the hospital. Dr. Len.
Visiting Hours, so frightening you may never recover. Starring Lee Grant, William Shatner, Linda Pearl. When was the last time you sat in a movie theater and felt the cold fingers of fear creeping up your back? 20th Century Fox presents a movie so intense, so frightening, you may never recover. Visiting Hours, starring Lee Grant, William Shatner, Linda Pearl. Rated R. Once, every few years, a movie comes along that is so chilling, so terrifying, it sets a new level of fright. It will reach you in ways you cannot predict, because it is so intense, so frightening, you may never recover. Visiting Hours, starring Lee Grant, William Shatner, Linda Pearl. Rated R. In this hospital, your next visit may be your last.
All visitors, please leave the hospital.
Visiting hours so frightening you may never recover. Rated R.
At number 3, Poltergeist. That's right, guys. It's time for the heavy hitters from 1982. This one is an American supernatural horror film directed by the great Tobe Hooper and written by Steven Spielberg. Of course, there's the whole debate about how much Spielberg had influence over Hooper on this set because it was his baby. Some people have gone as far to say that Spielberg was basically the director on this movie. I think that myth has been put to bed a little bit. I've heard some stuff from people who were actually on the set of this movie who have said no, that wasn't the case. Tobe Hooper directed this film. Steven was nearby doing other stuff, and he would stop by the set, but he never interfered with what Toby was doing. So yeah, it's kind of like a football team. They have a plan going in. It's not like they're just out there doing whatever to see if it works. I'm sure that Steven and Toby had a working relationship going in and knew how that would be handled. And yeah, the film is great. It stars JoBeth Williams, Craig T. Nelson, Heather O'Rourke, and it's basically just a classic horror film at this point, right? Now, I'll be honest with you, it's one of those films like Gremlins where I have a great love and appreciation for it as a kid watching it. But when I got older, I was a little bit more like it's not really as much of a horror film to me as it is a spectacle. It's a film event. You have all these lights and all this stuff happening, and it's more impactful than just a regular horror film. I would say that. And I think that plays into what we were talking about originally here. You can totally feel both these guys in the movie, right? You can feel Spielberg's eye for the insane, like, lighting and crazy stuff, like from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that kind of stuff. You see that in here, but you also see, like, the darkness of Tobe Hooper in some of these scenes, especially, like, the epic scene at the end where she's in the swimming pool with all the skeletons. Oh, my God. That's one of the creepiest things of all time, right? When you imagine that. And I've heard, I don't know if everybody else has heard this or not, that some of those skeletons were real, right? Ugh, gross. JoBeth Williams deserves more attention for her performance in this. Probably Craig T. Nelson too, but I just remember, JoBeth Williams coming off like a really great mom in a film that really needed one, right? Real quick story here. My dad was a projectionist when I was a little kid, and he took my mother to the theater to see Poltergeist, and he had already seen it, and she said that he set her up because she thought that kind of nothing scary was really happening, and then they had the big scene where they got Carol Ann back, and she thought everything was cool, and my dad chose that moment to get up to go talk to his buddy who was up in the projection booth at that time, and left her down there, and she said that's when all the fun started, and she was screaming down there by herself, and he was up there laughing his butt off. So yeah, great movie, guys, and it's a great one to watch with the kids. This one will give them a little scare when they're young. It'll give them like that little jolt of scare, but it's not too far over the top, I don't think, for me anyway. So let's take a look at the trailer for Poltergeist.
The house looks just like the one next to it. And the one next to that. And the one next to that. A young couple live in it.
Give Ken a kiss.
You are so obnoxious.
With their 3 children.
Poor Ken, kind of chew each bite 10 times.
And something more.
They're here. Sweetie, remember last night? Do you remember when you woke up and you said they were here?
Uh-huh.
Well, who did you mean? Who's here?
TV people.
Something's funny going on here next door. Something,
We were wondering if maybe you had experienced any disturbances lately.
What kind of disturbances?
I don't over this house. I've never sensed anything like it.
That thing is in there with my baby.
There are hundreds.
Now Steven Spielberg crosses a frightening new threshold into a world within our own. Its form is revealed.
What is it?
Its focus is clear. And the games are over. Poltergeist. It knows what scares you.
At number 2, Creepshow. It's an American horror comedy anthology film directed by George Romero and written by Stephen King. And guys, if you ever get a chance, look up the backstory to Creepshow. There's a great story to how this movie got made and why it got made. Stephen King and George Romero were at the time trying to build credibility and trying to get some cash on their own. See, they knew if they tried to make The Stand through a studio, that the studio would take total control over what they were doing because it would cost millions and millions of dollars to make The Stand, right? So no studio was going to give them all that money and full control over the project. What they wanted to do was find a way to come up with the money on their own to make The Stand. And so they thought if they got a big hit with Creepshow, that would help get some investors. As it is, that never materialized. And what we got was a great anthology, probably one of the greatest anthology films of all time in the horror genre, with a great cast that includes Hal Holbrook, who just passed, Adrienne Barbeau, Fritz Weaver, Leslie Nielsen, Carrie Nye, E.G. Marshall, with Ed Harris and Ted Danson. I love every single segment in this anthology except for the very last one because I'm not a big fan of bugs myself. Now, Father's Day, who doesn't love that one? It's iconic. Where's my cake? I say that every Father's Day. Trust me, I say it on my birthday. Anytime where I feel like I'm deserved a cake, I'm dropping that line. The Lonesome Death of Jody Verrill with Stephen King is probably one of my favorite things of all time. I just love it. He's so funny in it. And it's crazy that he didn't do more characters. He's really good at playing that particular one. Something That Tied You Over with Leslie Nielsen and Ted Danson. I love the line where Ted Danson says, "Hey, buddy, I can bench press 200 pounds. I was like, You can tell it's like the early 80s, 70s, like 200 pounds is something that somebody would be worried about, you know, and yeah, I just thought it was hilarious. Love that one, though. How long can you hold your breath? You know, I can hold my breath for a long time. Yeah, right. Love it. The Crate is one of the best of all time, and I love it because it throws you off the other plot. The other plot with Hal Holbrook and his wife is amazing because he keeps killing her in the segment, and that's one of the most fun parts to me. I love the part about the Crate, the monster. That's all great, but the part with him and his wife is truly amazing in my opinion. I love all the different ways he kills her in his mind. By the time we got to the end of that one, it actually seemed like what was in the crate was too good for her. And of course, the last one is They're Creeping Up on You with E.G. Marshall. Not my favorite. You know, each one of them had one segment that I didn't care that much about. I think the segment in part 2 where the woman hits the hitchhiker, I'm like, I've seen that 100 times before. I'm pretty sure that was a Twilight Zone at some point too. Although all these are based on the old comic books and stuff like that, it's still Stephen King stories, right? With that being said, guys, let's take a look at the trailer for one of the greatest horror anthologies of all time, Creepshow.
Coming soon. Jolting tales of horror. Creep Show. From the author of Carrie, The Shining, and Cujo. And the creator of Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. You'll scream at ghastly ghouls. Cringe at weird kids. And shiver at the doings of evil doctors.
This is going to be extremely painful, Mr. Verrill.
Creep Show will grab you, grow on you, and give you the creeps.
No, this is going to be an entirely new experience.
Creep Show, the most fun you'll ever have being scared.
All right, horror fans, we've made it down to number one for 1982. And guys, there's really only one choice here, and that is John Carpenter's The Thing. It's an American science fiction horror film directed, of course, by the great John Carpenter and written by Bill Lancaster, based on the 1938 John W. Campbell Jr. novella, Who Goes There? It tells the story of a group of American researchers in Antarctica where they encounter The Thing, a parasitic extraterrestrial life form that assimilates, then imitates other organisms. The group is overcome by paranoia and conflict as they learn that they can no longer trust each other and that any one of them could possibly be The Thing. The film stars Kurt Russell as the team's helicopter pilot R.J. McCready and features Wilford Brimley, T.K. Carter, David Clennon, Keith David, and Richard Dysart. To be honest, guys, I have The Thing in my top 5 films of all time, and it could easily be called the greatest horror film of all time, and I wouldn't even argue that with anyone, because what The Thing does is it bombards you with fear. Instead of just having one major element of fear, it bombards you with several elements of fear, and it almost feels like fear overload. There's paranoia, isolation, and we have this alien that's running around stealing our very identity. I actually read Who Goes There in college, and I can say for a fact that John Carpenter's The Thing feels like a poetic response to that story. It's a great film, one of the greatest American horror films ever made, guys. Let's take a look at my number one pick for 1982, John Carpenter's The Thing.
This is U.S. Station 31. You read me? Found something in the ice. We need some help down here. Can anybody hear me? We found something. We found something. We found something.
12 men have just discovered something. For 100,000 years, it was buried in the snow and ice. Now it has found a place to live. Inside. Where no one can see it, or hear it, or feel it.
I know I'm human. Some of you are still human. This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to, but it's vulnerable out in the open. If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies. Nobody left to kill it. And then it's won.
You guys gonna listen to Gary? He can beat one of those things!
All right, horror fans, that does it for 1982. That is a wrap on this show. We'll be back with 1983 probably in a week or two. And until then, guys, leave me your comments below. Let me know where you think I went wrong. Where did I go crazy? I know there's several films, at least 3 or 4 on my list that aren't going to be on most people's list. So I'm interested to hear what films you would have put in those slots. There's lots of great cheesy horror films from 1982, so it would be interesting to see which ones are whose favorites. Now, don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. As always, check out our Patreon page too. You can donate as little as $2 a month, and we'll put you on our Patreon pick show. We'll let you choose a review you want. We'll talk about the horror topics you want us to talk about. Guys, it's slick, it's nasty, and it's cold out there. Kind of like The Thing, right? So take it easy, be safe, and as always, we will talk to you the next time we've got something worth talking about. Bye.